The Florida sun beat down mercilessly on the aged stone facade of the St. Augustine Historical Society as Emma Winters adjusted her glasses and peered at the faded cardboard box. After 3 years working as the Society's newest archivist, she developed a sixth sense for interesting finds, and something about this particular donation, recently discovered in the attic of the Ponce de Leon Hotel during renovations, made her pulse quicken. "Robert, take a look at this," Emma called to her colleague across the climate-controlled basement. Robert Mitchell glanced up from his laptop, his salt and pepper beard catching the fluorescent light. At 58, he'd spent most of his adult life preserving St. Augustine's rich history, making him something of a local legend. "What have you got there?" he asked, rolling his chair over to Emma's workstation. Emma carefully lifted a manila envelope from the box. The handwritten label read, "Wilkinson Family, 1895. Inside was a collection of sepia-toned photographs, most showing a well-dressed Victorian family posing stiffly before various St. Augustine landmarks. But one photo in particular caught her attention. "These twins," Emma said, pointing to a photograph of 2 identical girls, perhaps 8 years old, standing hand in hand on the steps of what appeared to be the old lighthouse. "There's something unsettling about them." Robert leaned closer, squinting through his reading glasses. The Wilkinson twins. I remember reading about them in some of the older records. Tragic story." Emma felt a chill despite the carefully regulated temperature. "What happened to them?" "If I recall correctly, they disappeared sometime in the late 1890s. There was quite a scandal. Accusations thrown around, search parties for weeks. They were never found." Robert tapped the photograph thoughtfully. "This might be one of the only surviving images of them." Emma pulled her digital scanner closer. "I'm going to digitize these. The resolution on this equipment is incredible. We might see details that weren't visible before." As the high-resolution scan appeared on her monitor, Emma zoomed in on the twins' faces. Their expressions, which had seemed merely serious at first glance, now revealed something more complex. The girl on the left stared directly at the camera with an intensity that seemed beyond her years. The girl on the right looked slightly to the side, her gaze fixed on something outside the frame, her tiny hand clutching her sister's with white-knuckled tension. "That's odd," Emma murmured, zooming in further. "Look at their eyes." Robert leaned toward the screen. "What about them?" "They don't match. I mean, they're identical twins, but their pupils—" Emma pointed to the screen. "The left twins' pupils are perfectly round, but the right twins are elongated somehow, almost like a camera artifact," Robert interjected pragmatically. "These old photographs often have imperfections." Emma wasn't convinced. "Maybe, but look at their hands." She zoomed in on where the twins' hands clasped together. "The knuckles are white from squeezing so hard. And is that a bruise?" Robert adjusted his glasses and peered closer. "Could be a shadow or discoloration in the photo. But speaking of odd details, what's that in the background?" Emma shifted the focus to the lighthouse behind the girls. In the upper window, barely perceptible even in the high-resolution scan, was a dark shape. Emma increased the contrast, and both archivists inhaled sharply. A face, or something like a face, was pressed against the glass, watching the twins from above. "That can't be right," Robert said, his scholarly detachment momentarily shaken. "The lighthouse keeper would have been on duty, but not in that specific window, and the proportions seem wrong." Emma saved the enhanced image and sat back in her chair. "I'd like to research these twins further. There's got to be more about their disappearance in our records." Robert checked his watch. "It's already past 6. The rest of the staff left hours ago." "I won't be long," Emma promised. "I'm just going to check the digital archives quickly, maybe pull a few of the cross-referenced files." Robert hesitated. "Don't stay too late. This building gets strange after dark. The security guard won't be on duty until 10, and I don't like the idea of you being here alone." Emma smiled. "I've worked late plenty of times. Besides, I'm not alone. I've got the twins to keep me company." She gestured toward the screen with a wry smile. Robert didn't return her smile. "Just be careful. Some stories in St. Augustine's history are better left undisturbed." He gathered his belongings and headed for the door. "Lock up behind me, will you?" After Robert left, Emma turned back to the photograph, transfixed by the twins' haunting expressions. She opened the Society's digital archive and typed "Wilkinson twins" into the search field. Several results appeared, mostly census records and newspaper clippings. She clicked on a headline from the St. Augustine Evening Record, dated November 17th, 1895. "Wilkinson twins, still missing, foul play suspected." The article detailed the disappearance of Elizabeth and Eleanor Wilkinson, 8-year-old daughters of prominent businessman Thomas Wilkinson and his wife Harriet. The girls had last been seen playing near the lighthouse on November 10th, 1895. The article mentioned that Thomas Wilkinson had recently made enemies after foreclosing on several properties during an economic downturn. Emma checked the date on the back of the photograph, October 30th, 1895, less than 2 weeks before they vanished. A soft thump from upstairs made Emma jump. She glanced at the time, 8:26 p.m. The building should be empty. "Hello?" she called, feeling slightly foolish. "Is someone there?" Silence answered her. Probably just the old building settling, she reasoned, though she couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. She returned to her research, finding another article dated December 5th, 1895. "Search for Wilkinson twins abandoned. Mother committed to asylum." Uyo. According to the report, Harriet Wilkinson had suffered a mental breakdown after her daughter's disappearance, claiming she still heard their voices at night and insisting they were trapped between worlds. She was committed to the Florida State Hospital for the Insane in Chattahoochee after attempting to set fire to the lighthouse, claiming it was the only way to free them. A chill ran down Emma's spine, despite the controlled temperature of the archive room. She scrolled through more articles, learning that Thomas Wilkinson had committed suicide in 1897, his business in ruins and his reputation destroyed by rumors that he had been involved in his daughter's disappearance. Emma rubbed her tired eyes and glanced at her phone. 9:43 p.m. She'd been researching for hours without realizing it. As she prepared to leave, she noticed another file she hadn't opened. Lighthouse Keeper's Statement. The statement was from William Porter, the lighthouse keeper in 1895. His account described strange occurrences in the weeks before the twins disappeared. Items moving on their own, unexplained cold spots, and most disturbingly, voices of children where no children should be. Porter wrote, "I fear the lighthouse has become home to something unnatural. The night the Wilkinson girls vanished, I saw a shadow moving inside the lens room, a shadow with no source. And though I was alone, I heard laughter echoing up the spiral stairs. Not joyful laughter, but something hollow and wrong. I have tendered my resignation. May God have mercy on whoever takes my place." Emma closed the file, a knot forming in her stomach. The building seemed different now, the shadows deeper, the silence heavier. As she gathered her things, her gaze fell once more on the scan of the twins. With a jolt of alarm, she realized something had changed. The girl on the right, who had been looking away, was now staring directly at the camera, just like her sister. "That's not possible," Emma whispered, heart racing. She looked again, and everything was as it had been originally. The right twin looking slightly off camera. Emma pressed her palms against her eyes. She was overtired, her mind playing tricks. As she stood to leave, the lights flickered briefly, and Emma heard what sounded like children's laughter echoing faintly down the hallway. She froze, straining to listen, but the sound didn't repeat. "Just go home, Emma," she muttered to herself, gathering her belongings with trembling hands. "You're exhausted and letting your imagination run wild." On her way out, she passed the glass display case containing artifacts from St. Augustine's early days. She could have sworn she glimpsed a reflection in the glass, 2 small figures in white dresses, But when she turned, the hallway behind her was empty. The night air was thick with humidity as Emma hurried to her car, the weight of what she discovered pressing down on her. Whatever had happened to the Wilkinson twins in 1895, their story wasn't over, and somehow, Emma feared, she had just become part of it. The next morning, Emma arrived at work with dark circles under her eyes. Sleep had been elusive, interrupted by dreams of two little girls calling her name from the shadows of her bedroom. "You look terrible," Robert remarked as she dropped her bag at her workstation. "Late night?" "Couldn't sleep," Emma admitted, not meeting his eyes. She wasn't ready to tell him about the changing photograph or the sounds she'd heard. He'd think she was losing her mind. "I found some interesting information about the Wilkinson twins, though." She shared what she'd discovered about their disappearance, their mother's breakdown, and the lighthouse keeper's strange experiences. Robert listened intently, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "Emma, I think you should pass this project to someone else," he said when she finished. "These old cases can become consuming." "I'm fine," Emma insisted. "It's fascinating, that's all. Besides, I've already started the cataloguing process." Robert looked unconvinced but didn't press the issue. "Well, at least you won't be alone today. There's a professor from Flagler College coming in to see some of our Civil War materials. Dr. James Howell. He's written extensively on the paranormal history of St. Augustine." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Paranormal history? That sounds more like tourist trap material than academic research." "Don't be so quick to judge," Robert replied. "Howell approaches the subject with scholarly rigor. St. Augustine is the oldest European settlement in the U.S. Over 450 years of history creates layers of stories, some more explicable than others." As if on cue, the basement door opened, and a man in his mid-40s with rumpled clothes and an untamed beard strode in. "Dr. Howell, I presume," Robert said, extending his hand. "Please, call me James," the professor replied, shaking Robert's hand before turning to Emma. "And you must be Ms. Winters. Robert mentioned you're working on some recently discovered photographs." Emma shook his hand, surprised. "Yes, but how did you—" "I called him this morning," Robert admitted. "I thought he might have some insights about the Wilkinson case." Emma shot Robert an annoyed look. This was her discovery, her project. She didn't need some paranormal enthusiast hijacking her research. "I understand your hesitation," James said, seemingly reading her expression. "But I've spent 20 years documenting St. Augustine's history, including its darker chapters. The Wilkinson twins case has fascinated me for years, though primary sources have been scarce." Despite her initial resistance, Emma found herself sharing the digitized photographs and her findings. James examined them with scholarly precision, his excitement growing visibly. "This is extraordinary," he breathed, studying the enhanced image of the twins. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the computer. Emma nodded reluctantly. James zoomed in on various parts of the image, muttering to himself. When he reached the face in the lighthouse window, he let out a low whistle. "I've interviewed 3 former lighthouse keepers who reported similar apparitions," he said, "but never had photographic evidence." He turned to Emma. "Have you visited the lighthouse since beginning this research?" Emma shook her head. "I've only examined the archives." "We should go there," James suggested. "The historical context could be valuable. Many of the original structures remain unchanged." "That's not necessary," Emma began, but Robert interrupted. "Actually, it's a good idea. Field research is part of our mandate, and the lighthouse falls within our jurisdiction. I can authorize a site visit this afternoon." Emma wanted to object, but couldn't formulate a rational reason why. The truth was, the thought of visiting the lighthouse filled her with inexplicable dread. 3 hours later, Emma found herself standing at the base of the St. Augustine Lighthouse with James, staring up at the 165-foot tower, gleaming white against the clear blue sky. "It looks so normal," Emma said, not sure what she'd expected. "Most haunted places do in daylight," James replied. his tone matter-of-fact rather than dramatic. But this lighthouse has one of the highest concentrations of reported phenomena on the East Coast. The most common reports involve children's voices and sightings of two young girls in white dresses. Emma felt her skin prickle. The Wilkinson twins? That's the assumption, though there have been other tragedies here. In 1873, several children drowned when a construction cart broke and fell into the ocean. They purchased tickets and began the climb up the 219 steps of the spiral staircase. As they ascended, the temperature seemed to drop despite the Florida heat outside. "Do you feel that?" Emma asked, wrapping her arms around herself. James nodded. Cold spots are common in places with reported paranormal activity. Some theories suggest entities draw energy from their surroundings, creating temperature fluctuations. They continued climbing until they reached the lens room at the top. The massive Fresnel lens dominated the circular space, and windows provided a panoramic view of St. Augustine and the Atlantic Ocean beyond. "The photograph was taken on those steps down there," Emma said, pointing to the entrance below, "and the face appeared in that window." She indicated one of the windows facing the ocean. James approached the window and placed his hand against the glass. Many lighthouse keepers lived here with their families. Children would have played in these rooms, run up and down these stairs. "But what happened to the Wilkinson twins?" Emma asked, moving to stand beside him. "They couldn't just vanish." "Oh, in a place with this much history, the line between past and present sometimes blurs," James said quietly. "There are stories in St. Augustine of people who disappear for days, only to return with no memory of where they've been. Others who see visions of events that happened centuries ago, as vivid as if they were occurring in real time." Emma was about to respond when a flash of movement caught her eye, a small white shape darting past one of the lower windows. "Did you see that?" she gasped. James turned quickly. "What was it?" "I don't know. Something white moving quickly, like a child in a dress." They hurried back down the spiral staircase, Emma leading the way. When they reached the window where she'd seen the movement, there was nothing there, but the air felt different, heavier, charged with static electricity. "James," Emma said slowly, "do you believe the twins might still be here somehow? Not just as spirits or memories, but actually trapped?" Before he could answer, a child's voice echoed up the stairwell. "Emma." They both froze. The voice had been clear, unmistakable, and had called her by name. "That's not possible," Emma whispered. "No one else is here except the staff, and there are no children on the premises right now." "Emma!" the voice called again, now sounding like two voices speaking in unison. "Come find us!" James gripped the railing. "We should go back down." They descended the remaining stairs in tense silence, both jumping when they heard what sounded like running footsteps and girlish laughter somewhere above them, despite having just come from the top of the lighthouse. Outside, in the bright sunshine, Emma felt her fear begin to recede. I don't know what that was." James looked troubled. "Something has been activated. By finding the photograph, by enhancing it, by focusing your attention on the twins, you've established a connection." "A connection to what?" Emma demanded. "To them, to whatever happened in 1895. These events sometimes follow patterns. They need the right circumstances, the right people, to manifest fully." Emma thought of the changing photograph, the laughter in the archives, the dreams that had plagued her sleep. "You think I'm the right person. Why me?" James studied her face. "I don't know, but I'd like to see that photograph again, the original this time, not just the scan. And I'd like to check something in the lighthouse records, visitor logs from 1895 specifically." Back at the Historical Society, Emma retrieved the original photograph while James pored over digitized lighthouse records. Robert had gone home for the day, leaving them alone in the quiet basement. "Emma!" James called, his voice tight with excitement or fear, she couldn't tell which. "I found something." She joined him at the computer, where he had pulled up a visitor log from October 1895. Look at the entry for October 30th, the day the photograph was taken, he said, pointing to a line on the screen. The log showed the Wilkinson family had visited, along with a photographer named Samuel Berwick. But James was pointing to a different name further down the page, E. Winters. Emma stared at the name, her mouth suddenly dry. That could be a coincidence. Perhaps, James conceded. But combined with everything else, the voices calling your name specifically, I wonder... He turned to the original photograph, examining it with a magnifying glass. After a moment, he sat back, his face pale. "What is it?" Emma asked, dread pooling in her stomach. In the background of the photograph, partially obscured by the lighthouse keeper. "I didn't notice it in the digital scan because the contrast was different, but in the original..." He handed her the magnifying glass and pointed to a blurry figure standing near the lighthouse entrance, behind the main subjects. Emma looked, adjusting the magnifying glass to bring the figure into focus. It was a woman in late Victorian dress. Her face turned slightly away from the camera. "I don't understand," Emma said. "Who is she?" "Look at her profile," James urged. "Look carefully." Emma adjusted the magnifying glass again, and the world seemed to tilt beneath her. The woman's profile, what was visible of it, was unmistakably similar to her own. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Not impossible," James said quietly. "Just extremely improbable. Unless what? Unless you were meant to find this photograph. Unless you're somehow connected to what happened to those twins." Emma set down the magnifying glass with a shaking hand. "That's absurd. I would know if I had ancestors who lived in St. Augustine in the 1890s. Would you? How much do you actually know about your family history?" Emma opened her mouth to answer, but realized she knew very little. She'd been raised by her grandmother after her parents died in a car accident when she was 4. Her grandmother had rarely spoken about family history, and Emma had never pressed the issue. "I need to go home," she said suddenly. "I need to think." James nodded. "Of course. But Emma, be careful. Whatever connection exists between you and the Wilkinson twins, it's growing stronger. They've found you after 130 years. They may not let go easily." Emma gathered her things, her mind racing. As she prepared to leave, she glanced one last time at the photograph of the twins. Both girls were now looking directly at the camera, their expressions identical, and their eyes were fixed on Emma with unmistakable recognition. That night, Emma dreamed she was standing at the base of the lighthouse, wearing a heavy Victorian dress. 2 little girls in white played nearby, their laughter carrying on the ocean breeze. They turned to her, their identical faces lighting up with recognition. "Miss Emma!" they called in unison. "Come play with us!" She moved toward them, but the ground beneath her feet began to shift and change. The lighthouse keeper emerged from the doorway, his face contorted with rage. "Get them away from here," he shouted. "They don't belong here." The twins grabbed Emma's hands, their small fingers ice cold. "He wants to hurt us," one whispered. "He says we know too much," the other added. The lighthouse keeper advanced toward them, something glinting in his hand. "Run!" Emma cried, pulling the girls toward the trees. They ran, the keeper's heavy footsteps pounding behind them. The twins knew a hiding place, a small cave in the coastal rocks. They slipped inside, huddling in the darkness as the keeper's lantern beams swept past the entrance. "We'll be safe here," one twin said. "Until morning," the other added. But as the tide began to rise, water seeped into the cave. Higher and higher it climbed, past their ankles, their knees, their waists. "We can't stay here," Emma cried, trying to pull the girls toward the entrance. But they wouldn't move. "We can't leave," they said together. "He's still out there." "And now you're here with us," one said, her grip tightening painfully. "Forever," the other finished as the cold water reached their chins. Emma woke, gasping for air, her sheets soaked with sweat. The dream had been so vivid, so real. Not like a dream at all, but like a memory. She fumbled for her phone. 3:17 a.m. Too early to call anyone, but she knew she wouldn't sleep again. She turned on her laptop and began searching for information about her family history. Her grandmother's maiden name had been Klein, not Winters, so the connection wasn't immediately obvious. But after hours of searching through genealogy websites, Emma found what she was looking for. Her great-great-grandmother had been Emily Winters, born in 1870. She had moved to St. Augustine in the 1890s to work as a governess before marrying Wilhelm Klein in 1897 and moving to Chicago. Winters, Emma whispered, recalling the name in the lighthouse visitor log. Had her great-great-grandmother known the Wilkinson twins? Had she been there the day they disappeared? The timing fit. Emily Winters had left St. Augustine in early 1896, just months after the twins vanished. As dawn broke, Emma called James, not caring about the early hour. "I found her," she said when he answered, his voice groggy with sleep. "Emily Winters, my great-great-grandmother. She was in St. Augustine in 1895. "Emma, that's—" he began, but she cut him off. "I had a dream last night, about the twins, about how they disappeared. It wasn't a dream. It was like I was remembering something. James, I think Emily Winters knew what happened to those girls." There was a long pause before James spoke again. "Meet me at the archives in an hour. And Emma, don't go anywhere near the lighthouse until I get there." At the Historical Society, they dug deeper into the archives, searching for any connection between Emily Winters and the Wilkinson family. It was Robert who found the crucial piece of information in a collection of employment records from prominent St. Augustine families. "Here," he said, pointing to an entry. "Emily Winters was employed by the Wilkinson family from August 1895 to December 1895 as a governess to twin daughters, Elizabeth and Eleanor." Emma felt a chill. She was their governess, which means she would have been with them regularly, possibly even on the day they disappeared, James added. "But why isn't she mentioned in any of the newspaper accounts?" Emma wondered. Robert turned a page in the file. "Because she was a suspect, at least initially. Look at this, an interview transcript with Thomas Wilkinson from November 1895. He states that Miss Winters had taken the girls to the lighthouse that morning, but returned alone, claiming the girls had run off to play with other children. She was the last person to see them alive," James murmured. "That doesn't mean she did anything to them," Emma protested, feeling strangely defensive of a woman she'd never met. "No, but it explains why she left St. Augustine so abruptly," Robert said, "and possibly why this part of your family history wasn't discussed. In small towns, suspicion can be as damning as guilt." Emma thought of her dream, the lighthouse keeper chasing them, the hiding place in the rocks, the rising tide. "I think I know what happened to them," she said quietly, "and I don't think Emily was responsible. Not directly, anyway." She told them about her dream, describing the cave and the rising tide. James's eyes widened. "There are sea caves all along that part of the coast. Some are completely submerged at high tide. We need to check historical tide tables for November 10th, 1895, Robert said, already turning to his computer. It took less than 5 minutes to confirm. There had been an unusually high tide that day, coupled with reports of a sudden squall that had caused significant coastal flooding. If they were trapped in one of those caves— Robert didn't need to finish the thought. "But why would they hide there in the first place?" Emma pressed. "In my dream, they were running from the lighthouse keeper." "William Porter," James said. "The same keeper who later reported strange occurrences and resigned his position." "We need to know more about Porter," Emma insisted. "Was he just a convenient scapegoat in my dream? Or was there something actually suspicious about him?" They spent the next few hours researching William Porter. The picture that emerged was troubling. Reports of drinking on duty, financial problems, and rumors of inappropriate behavior toward female visitors. "There's a complaint filed by Emily Winters," Robert discovered, opening yet another digitized document. Dated November 8th, 1895, 2 days before the twins disappeared. She claims Porter made unwelcome advances toward her during a visit to the lighthouse and acted in a disturbing and threatening manner when rebuffed. And 2 days later, she takes the twins back to the lighthouse. Emma frowned. That doesn't make sense. Unless she didn't have a choice, James suggested. If the twins' parents insisted, or if the girls themselves wanted to go. Emma's phone chimed with a text message alert. When she checked it, her blood ran cold. The message was from an unknown number and contained just 4 words. "We're waiting for you." As she stared at her phone, the lights in the archive room flickered. A cold draft swept through the basement, and all 3 of them shivered simultaneously. "They're getting stronger," James said quietly. "The connection between you and what happened, it's creating a doorway." "A doorway to what?" Robert demanded. "To the past, to them." James turned to Emma. "You need to end this connection before it's too late." "How?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "By finishing what Emily started," James said, "by finding the twins and letting them go." The plan they formulated was simple, if somewhat unorthodox. They would visit the lighthouse at low tide, when the sea caves would be accessible. Emma would attempt to use her connection to the twins, through Emily, to locate the specific cave where they had hidden. "This is absurd," Robert protested. "We should be contacting the authorities, organizing a proper search based on historical records." "And tell them what?" James countered. "That we believe we've located 2 children who disappeared 130 years ago, based on a dream and some old photographs? They'd laugh us out of the station." Emma said nothing. She knew, with a certainty that defied rational explanation, that she needed to do this. The twins had been calling to her across more than a century of silence. She couldn't ignore them now. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, the 3 of them stood on the rocky shoreline near the lighthouse. The tide was at its lowest ebb, revealing a series of small caves in the coastal rock. "There," Emma said suddenly, pointing to a particular opening partially hidden by a large boulder. "That's the one from my dream." They approached cautiously, Robert shining a powerful flashlight into the darkness. The cave extended about 20 feet into the rock, ending in a chamber where the ceiling rose to about 7 feet. At high tide, the entire cave would be completely submerged. "I don't see anything," Robert said, sweeping the flashlight across the rough walls. "Look more carefully," James urged. "After this many years, there might not be much left." Emma moved deeper into the cave, drawn by an inexplicable certainty. At the back of the chamber, in the highest part where the last of the water would have reached, she saw something wedged into a narrow crevice in the rock. "There," she said, pointing. Robert directed the flashlight beam. Lodged in the crevice was a small, tarnished silver locket. Using a pocket knife, James carefully worked the locket free and handed it to Emma. The metal was corroded from years of saltwater exposure, but the embossed initials were still visible. E.W. "Elizabeth Wilkinson," Robert suggested. "Or Eleanor," James added. Emma shook her head. "No, Emily Winters. This was hers." She tried to open the locket, but years of corrosion had sealed it shut. As she held the locket, the atmosphere in the cave seemed to change. The air grew colder, and the sound of the waves outside became muffled, as if they were much farther away than just a few feet. "Do you hear that?" Emma whispered. Faint voices echoed from deeper in the cave, though they had already reached the end of the physical space. Childish laughter, then a woman's voice calling frantically, "Elizabeth! Eleanor! Where are you?" Robert's face had gone pale. "We need to leave. Now." But Emma took a step deeper into the cave, toward a section of wall that seemed to shimmer slightly, like heat rising from hot pavement. "They're here," she murmured. "They've been here all along." "Emma, don't—" James began, but he was too late. Emma reached out and touched the shimmering wall. The world seemed to tilt sideways, and suddenly she was no longer in the cave with Robert and James. She was still in a cave, but it was different, darker, wetter, and she was wearing a heavy wool dress from another era. Two small girls huddled against the back wall, their white dresses soaked to the knees with seawater. "Miss Emma," they cried in unison, their faces lighting up with desperate hope. "Elizabeth, Eleanor," Emma heard herself say, but it wasn't her voice. It was Emily's voice. "We must hurry, the tide is coming in." "We can't leave," one of the twins said fearfully. "He's still out there." "Mr. Porter is gone," Emma assured them. "Your father has sent people looking for you. We must go now." She reached out her hands, and the twins moved toward her. But as they did, the cave entrance darkened, and a large figure appeared, silhouetted against the fading daylight. "There you are," William Porter's voice growled. "Thought you could hide from me, did you?" He stepped into the cave, reeking of whiskey, a knife glinting in his right hand. "No one believes a governess over a lighthouse keeper," he slurred. "Especially not after she and her charges have a tragic accident." Emily pushed the twins behind her. "The Wilkinsons know we're here," she lied. "They'll be coming any minute." Porter laughed. "No, they think you've taken the girls into town. No one will look here until it's too late. High tide's coming fast today." As if to emphasize his point, a wave surged into the cave, the water now reaching their knees. "You won't get away with this," Emily said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I already have," Porter replied, stepping closer. "By the time they find your bodies, the water will have washed away any evidence. Just a tragic accident, a foolish governess who didn't respect the tides." Another wave surged in, more powerful than the last. Porter momentarily lost his footing, and Emily saw her chance. She charged forward, slamming into him with all her weight. They both fell into the rising water, struggling in the darkness. The twins screamed as Porter's knife slashed wildly. Emily felt a searing pain across her ribs, but managed to knock the knife from his hand. It clattered against the stone and disappeared into the churning water. "Run!" she screamed to the twins. "Run now!" The girls hesitated, clearly terrified. "Now!" Emily shouted again, still grappling with Porter. The twins finally moved, splashing toward the entrance. But another powerful wave surged in, knocking them off their feet. They disappeared beneath the dark water with terrified screams. "No!" Emily cried, fighting to break free from Porter. A wave slammed Porter against the cave wall with bone-crushing force. He slumped into the water, unmoving. Emily fought against the current, desperately searching for the twins in the near darkness. "Elizabeth!" "Eleanor!" she called repeatedly, but there was no answer except the roar of the incoming tide. The water was chest-high now and rising rapidly. Emily made a final, desperate search before the survival instinct forced her to retreat toward the entrance. But as she reached the narrowest part of the cave, something snagged her dress. The silver locket she always wore had caught on a jagged piece of rock. She tugged frantically as the water rose to her chin. With a final desperate effort, the chain broke, leaving the locket behind as Emma fought her way out of the cave and into the fading daylight, the twins' final screams still echoing in her ears. Emma gasped, finding herself back in the present on her knees in the cave. Robert and James were beside her, their faces etched with concern. "Emma, can you hear me?" Robert was saying, his hands on her shoulders. "I saw it," she whispered. "I was there. I was her. Emily tried to save them, but the tide came in too fast. Porter tried to kill them, to kill her, but the sea took them all. Except Emily." "She survived," Emma gasped, finding herself back in the present on her knees in the cave. Robert and James were beside her, their faces etched with concern. "Emma, can you hear me?" Robert was saying, his hands on her shoulders. "I saw it," she whispered. "I was there. I was her. Emily tried to save them, but the tide came in too fast. Porter tried to kill them, to kill her, but the sea took them all. Except Emily. She survived." James helped her to her feet. "What happened, Emma? You touched the wall and then collapsed." "Emily was their governess," Emma said, her voice stronger now. Porter, the lighthouse keeper, had made advances toward her. When she rejected him, he threatened her. The day the twins disappeared, he followed them here. He was going to kill all three of them and make it look like an accident. But the tide came in faster than expected, James guessed. Emma nodded, clutching the locket tightly. Emily tried to save the twins, but a wave swept them away. Porter was killed too, smashed against the cave wall. Emily barely escaped with her life. She lost this. Emma held up the locket as she was escaping. So Porter and the twins died here, Robert said quietly, while Emily survived. But she never told anyone what really happened, Emma continued. Who would believe her? A governess against the word of a respected lighthouse keeper. Even if Porter's body was found, she might have been accused of murder. So she left St. Augustine, James said, carrying the guilt and the secret with her. And the twins remained trapped, Emma whispered. Not just their bodies, but something more. They've been waiting all this time for someone to know the truth, for someone connected to Emily to come back. As if, in response to her words, the temperature in the cave plummeted. The beam of Robert's flashlight flickered and dimmed, casting eerie shadows on the rough stone walls. We should leave, Robert said urgently. The tide will be turning soon. But Emma didn't move. They're still here, she said. Can't you feel them? And indeed, there was a presence in the cave now, a palpable sense of watching, waiting. The air seemed to thicken, making it difficult to breathe. Elizabeth Eleanor, Emma called softly. I know what happened to you. I know it wasn't your fault. It wasn't Emily's fault either. She tried to save you. A soft giggle echoed from the depths of the cave, though there was nowhere it could have originated from. They need to rest, James said quietly. After all this time, they need to be released. Emma understood what needed to be done. She carefully pried open the corroded locket with her fingernail. Inside was a tiny daguerreotype photograph, miraculously preserved despite the years of saltwater exposure. It showed the Wilkinson twins, smiling in a way they never had in the formal photograph from the archives. Elizabeth Eleanor, Emma said, her voice gentle but firm. It's time to go now. Emily never forgot you. She carried the guilt with her all her life, but it wasn't her fault, and it wasn't yours. You don't have to stay here anymore. The air in the cave stirred, swirling around them like a gentle breeze, though they were deep inside the rock. What's happening? Robert whispered. They're listening, James replied, his academic detachment giving way to wonder. Emma held up the locket, letting the faint beam of the flashlight catch the tiny photograph inside. See, she kept you with her, in her heart, and now I've brought you back together. She placed the locket gently in the same crevice where they had found it, pressing it securely into place. Your story is known now, she continued. Your truth is told. You can rest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, so faintly that they might have imagined it, came the sound of children's laughter. Not the eerie, hollow sound Emma had heard in the archives, but joyful, free. The air in the cave warmed suddenly, and the oppressive feeling lifted. Robert's flashlight brightened to full strength, illuminating the small space clearly. They're gone, James said with quiet certainty. The three of them made their way out of the cave, just as the tide began to turn, the first waves already lapping at the entrance. Standing on the shore in the fading light, Emma felt a profound sense of completion. Whatever connection had existed between her and the events of 1895 had been resolved. Emily's secret was finally told, and the twins were at peace. What will you do with the research? Robert asked as they walked back toward the lighthouse. Document it, Emma said firmly. All of it. The photographs, the newspaper articles, the visitor logs. The official record should show what really happened. And Porter, James asked, his reputation will be destroyed. Emma thought of the lighthouse keeper's final statement before his resignation about shadows moving on their own and hollow laughter in empty rooms. I think Porter was already being haunted by what he'd done. That's why he left the lighthouse. Some secrets refuse to stay buried, Robert said quietly, especially in a place like St. Augustine. As they reached the lighthouse parking lot, Emma looked back at the sea caves, now mostly submerged by the rising tide. The setting sun cast long shadows across the water, but for the first time since discovering the photograph, she felt no fear, only a deep sense of peace. "Emily did everything she could to save them," she said. "I hope she knows that they're at rest now." "I think she does," James replied, looking at Emma with a thoughtful expression. "Some connections transcend time and space. That's why the twins called to you specifically. That's why you were able to see what really happened." Later that night, as Emma prepared for bed, she realized the dreams that had plagued her sleep would likely be gone now. The twins had found what they were looking for: acknowledgement, understanding, release. She opened her laptop one last time to record everything while it was still fresh in her mind. As she typed, she thought about Emily Winters, her ancestor who had carried such a terrible secret for so long. Had she ever found peace? Had she ever forgiven herself for surviving when the twins had not? As Emma finished her account, she noticed something odd about the scan of the photograph that started it all. She opened the file, expecting to see the twins staring at the camera with their unnervingly intense gazes. But the photograph had changed once more. The twins were still there, still holding hands on the lighthouse steps, but their expressions were different now, peaceful, almost smiling. And they were no longer looking at the camera. They were looking at the blurry figure in the background, at Emily Winters, with expressions of forgiveness and love. Emma saved the file and closed her laptop. Outside her window, the distant beam of the St. Augustine lighthouse swept across the night sky, no longer a harbinger of dread, but a guardian of memory, illuminating the darkness and guiding lost souls home. In the morning, she would add the final chapter to the Wilkinson twins' story. Not a tale of disappearance and mystery, but one of revelation and release. Their voices, silent for 130 years, had finally been heard. Their truth, hidden for generations, had finally been told. And in St. Augustine, the oldest city in America, where layers of history pressed close against the present, one small piece of the past had finally found peace.